India just won't be held hostage by US tariff threats. The Indian economy has shrugged off Trump's announcement. By midday, the Bombay Stock Exchange was positive, up by 0.26% as investors remained confident in India's ability to absorb any proposed impact after Donald Trump's tariff rant on social media. Even towards the end of the day, the BSE was down barely 0.3%. Now, this must have come as a shock to the US president as the markets backed Indian Prime Minister Modi's decision not to compromise during the tariff negotiations. Just a few days ago, one of Donald Trump's aides had even threatened to destroy and crush the Indian economy. But guess what? Even the National Stock Exchange or NSE barely blinked after Trump's tariff tweet and was also trading in the positive. Trump also claimed US-Pakistan oil deal will see Islamabad sell oil to India in the future. Firstly, India won't need it. Secondly, dear President Trump, you are free to enter the volatile failed state like Pakistan. And thirdly, India-US trade in 2024 was $129 billion, while US-Pakistan trade in 2024 was just $7.3 billion. There is literally no competition here. India knows Trump is just using Pakistan as a leverage in trade negotiations. It remains to be seen if Washington would use Western media to influence the markets and the narrative. We'll know, just like during Operation Sindoor, if we see a lot of paid articles or stories trying to paint a grim picture on India's future outlook without evidence, despite India being the fastest growing global economy. Bharat will become the world's third biggest economy before 2030, probably around President Trump's final year of his second term in 2028. But just what happened? Why do Trump tariffs have no impact on India's economic rise? We'll tell you why investors are backing India and which sectors are likely to feel the pinch. Even American companies are betting on India's rise despite Trump's threats. Reports suggest Google is investing $6 billion to build Asia's largest data center in India. But first, the biggest takeaway of Trump's tariff announcement is that he has proven himself that India and PM Modi were right. 25 times Trump claimed that he played a role in stopping the India-Pakistan war.
I stopped the war.
25 times Trump claimed he used trade deal to stop the India-Pakistan conflict.
People have never really used trade the way I used it.
The Modi government outrightly rejected all claims, saying the decision to accept Pakistan's ceasefire proposal was not linked to any trade talks with the US.
In any conversation with the United States.
Today, Trump has proved India was right. There is no trade deal as India refuses to compromise on its key sectors, especially no compromise in agriculture, no genetically modified US food, and no compromise on dairy products or meat-based dairy feed. Now, Trump also posted attacking India-Russia relations in defense and oil imports. He stated, quote, "I don't care what India does with Russia. India and Russia can take their dead economies down together for all I care." Before we get you India's reaction, here's what RT tweeted, saying, quote, "India, a huge global economic powerhouse, is dead? It's already a major player, not just a rising star anymore," unquote. And RT is right. India's growth, according to an IMF report released just earlier this week, was at 6.4% in 2025, again the highest among the large economies. While the United States was just at 1.9%, even down from 2.8% last year in 2024, according to the New York Times report. Were bleak IMF projections for the US behind Trump's social media outburst? India's response was far more measured, showing statesmanship and a far cry from the emotional outbursts we are seeing of late from Washington. New Delhi added, quote, "India and the US have been engaged in negotiations on concluding a fair, balanced and mutually beneficial bilateral trade agreement over the last few months. We remain committed to that objective. The government will take all necessary steps to secure our national interest," adding that it is utmost importance on protecting and promoting the welfare of farmers, entrepreneurs and MSMEs, unquote. So the biggest question is, why is Indian economy thriving despite US pressure? Why is India not bending the knee to Donald Trump, unlike most other countries? Firstly, the fine print says Indian smartphone and tech exports to the US have been exempt from any tariffs for now, so Americans can keep buying their gadgets from India at cheaper prices. Some reports even suggest that even pharma sector has dodged tariffs for now. Secondly, India is a largely domestic consumption economy isolated from global economic uncertainty. India's exports to the US make up only 2% of the GDP, and tariff hike will impact only 0.8% of Indian GDP. Sure, the growth may be slower, but India will remain the fastest growing economy among the global top 50. Economist Aditi Raman of Moody's was quoted in a Business Today report which stated, quote, "While the US is India's largest trade partner, the Indian economy is relatively more domestically oriented than most of the region and relies far less on trade," adding that, quote, "Pharmaceuticals, gems and textiles are the key sectors that are likely to be hit," unquote. Thirdly, Barclays points out that despite Trump's open pressure tactics, trade negotiations will continue behind the scenes till later this year. A Barclays note stated, quote, "Indian officials are planning to continue negotiating for a bilateral trade deal by this fall, even if the US follows through with the announced tariffs on August 1st, unquote. But let's get into further details. India is at 25% tariffs. US neighbors Canada and Mexico have been slapped with 35% and 30% tariffs. Even traditional US allies, South Korea and Japan, have been hit with 15% tariffs each, while European Union and UK are at 15% and 10%. Other Asian countries, the Philippines, Indonesia, are at 19%, with Vietnam at 20%, just marginally less than India. So no one has been spared. Those with lesser tariffs had to promise huge investments in the US and compromise on domestic industries. Clearly, India is not prepared to pay that price unless it is mutually beneficial. For sure, New Delhi would have been hoping for a better deal than fellow Asian countries. Indians drive US tech boom and its Silicon Valley. So what explains Trump's sudden pro-Pakistan tilt? The same country that had been harboring 9/11 mastermind for years. While announcing tariffs, Trump described India and Modi as a friend, but claimed that the US has done relatively little business with the country because of its high tariffs, calling India's trade policy obnoxious. What is unclear right now is the exact details of the tariffs exempted on certain sectors such as pharma and tech, and the ones that were charged at a different rate such as iron, steel and auto. Details will emerge over a few days. US President's much-awaited announcement comes only days before a US delegation's planned visit to India on August 25th for the next round of negotiations for the proposed bilateral trade agreement between the two countries. Now, a study by the SBI declared that a flat 20% tariffs could shave off 50 basis points or just 0.5% from India's GDP. Though limited, it will impact export performance of certain sectors and overall economic growth. Posing a headwind to India's GDP growth, experts suggest that the new tariffs could have a potential impact of $30 billion on India's gross domestic product or GDP. So that would amount to just 0.7% of the $4.3 trillion GDP India is likely to have by the end of this year, 2025, as per the International Monetary Fund. Now, Goldman Sachs had predicted that based on the tariff rate, the impact on the currency will be negative, as the rupee will likely weaken against the US dollar. With over $9 billion in annual exports to the US suddenly facing headwinds, the jewelry sector is also at risk. Goods like dairy, processed food, tea and marine products now fall under the 25% tariff slab, reducing their competitiveness in the US market. This may force exporters to consider newer markets or absorb steep margin losses. Raymond Vickery, Senior Associate at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, called it a setback for the broader US-India strategic relationship. This is a very unfortunate development. This approach of my way or the highway is not the correct one. It is reflective very much of President Trump's background as a real estate developer. This development will be harmful, unquote. Despite progress in some areas, Indian officials resisted opening up the domestic market to imports of wheat, corn, rice, and genetically modified soybeans from the US, citing risks to the livelihood of millions of Indian farmers. India refused to concede on agriculture and dairy feed, particularly over non-vegetarian additives, something which is against Indian and Hindu cultural values. Remember, Trump tariffs are a massive U-turn on the Mission 500, which aim to increase bilateral trade between the two countries to $500 billion by 2030, an agreement reached between US President Donald Trump and Indian PM Modi just in February this year. But a lot seems to have changed since then. What do you believe? Was the Modi government right not to compromise its key sectors to the US? Leave a comment with your opinion, hit the like button and subscribe to Inconnect News.